The microwave clock said 5:12 a.m. when I realized I had been sitting on the kitchen floor for hours, holding a cold mug I never drank from. My legs were numb. My phone battery was at 3%. I hadn't moved because the front door hadn't moved. I kept telling myself not to imagine things. That was my specialty, imagining. Turning silence into disasters. Turning just a party into a courtroom in my head where I was both the prosecutor and the fool on trial. At 5:19, the lock finally clicked. I didn't jump up. I didn't yell. I didn't even breathe right away. She stepped inside slowly, like the house didn't belong to her anymore. Her shoes were in her hand, not on her feet. One heel was broken clean off. She didn't notice, or didn't care. She stood there, just stood there. I waited for the usual excuses. The dramatic sigh, the phone already in her hand, ready to prove nothing happened. I was prepared to apologize for overthinking, because that's what I always did. But she said nothing. Her eyes weren't red from crying. They were dry, empty, focused on nothing at all, like she had left something behind and didn't know how to get it back. I finally spoke, and my voice cracked immediately. Did something happen? She didn't answer. That silence wasn't normal silence. It wasn't tired silence. It was the kind that presses on your ears until you want to scream just to make sure sound still exists. She walked past me without looking, went straight to the sink, and washed her hands. Slowly, carefully, like she was trying to erase a feeling, not dirt. That's when I noticed the second thing. Her phone screen lit up on the counter. One notification. No name. Just a heart emoji and a timestamp from 18 minutes ago. I hated myself for looking. I hated myself more for understanding. Where were you? I asked, softer now, weaker. She dried her hands, turned around, finally looked at me, and for a split second, I thought she was about to apologize. Instead, she whispered, I don't know how to explain this without you hating me. That was when my stomach dropped, because she didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say nothing happened. She didn't even ask me to sit down. She said it like the damage was already done. Then she glanced down at her bare finger. No ring. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded like a coward, like a man who already knew he had lost, but didn't want to hear the final score. Okay, I said. Then don't explain yet. She looked surprised. I need a minute, I added. Because whatever happened at that party, it already followed you home. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just stood there again, silent, lost, without a word. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't the beginning of the truth. This was the moment after she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And I was still sitting on the kitchen floor, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen it coming. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I heard the lock click softly behind her. No footsteps, no running water, just silence. I stayed there in the kitchen, still on the cold floor like some abandoned statue, while my mind raced ahead of me like a dog off its leash. I knew better than to jump to conclusions. But how could I not, when everything about her was screaming that something was horribly off? When I finally forced myself to stand, my legs buckled slightly from sitting so long. I grabbed the edge of the counter, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The kind that comes not from panic, but from that slow, steady realization that your life might have just shifted and you weren't invited to the meeting where it happened. The bathroom door finally opened 20 minutes later. She emerged, not like someone refreshed or ready to talk, but like a ghost who had briefly borrowed her body. No makeup, her hair tied in a low, trembling bun. She looked at me for just a moment and then veered away to the living room without a single word. Her silence was now its own language, and I was somehow supposed to translate it. I followed her, even though everything inside me screamed not to. She sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the coffee table like it held an answer, or a memory, or maybe just a truth she couldn't say out loud. The ring was still missing. I kept glancing at her hand, and every time I did, I felt like I was getting punched by a ghost. You're not hurt, are you? I finally asked, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. Did someone do something? She shook her head. That's all. A single, pitiful shake, and then her eyes welled up with tears, but they didn't fall. She blinked them away like she didn't think she deserved to cry. You can tell me, I said, kneeling in front of her, hating myself for still reaching out like she hadn't just obliterated the trust we'd built over the past 5 years. Please, Lacey, say something. Anything. She looked at me then. Finally. And her eyes. God, I'll never forget that look. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even shame. It was the look of someone who had broken something important and didn't know whether to hide it or hand you the pieces. It was supposed to be one drink, she whispered. Just one. I didn't move. My brain latched onto those 5 words like they were the start of a confession I wasn't ready to hear. I didn't plan anything. I swear I didn't. But then he was there. Trent. From the Denver conference. I didn't know he'd be at the party. And She stopped, bit her lip, and looked away. My chest hollowed out. She didn't need to finish. I could hear everything she wasn't saying. I could see it in how she couldn't meet my eyes, in how her hands shook, in how she kept touching her empty ring finger like her body was still trying to feel something solid, something loyal. My voice was almost gone. Did you go home with him? She blinked fast. Her lips trembled. No, she said. But I should have. Those words, those exact words, they broke me more than a yes ever could have. Because it meant she wanted to. That her body may have come back here, but her heart, her mind, her loyalty, they didn't. She hadn't cheated, not in the physical sense. But emotionally, she had already left me at that party. And now she was sitting across from me, not begging for forgiveness, but simply trying to survive the storm she started. I got up without a word, walked back to the kitchen, and this time, I didn't wait for her to explain. I stood at the sink with the water running, staring down into nothing while the faucet roared like a storm I couldn't shut off. I didn't know why I turned it on. Maybe to drown out the sound of her still breathing behind me. Maybe to stop myself from turning around and saying something I'd regret. My hands trembled under the stream, but I didn't move. I couldn't. If I turned around, if I looked at her again, I knew I'd lose whatever fragile grip I had on myself. She hadn't cheated. That's what I kept repeating in my head like a prayer. She hadn't cheated. She just wanted to. As if that somehow made it better. As if imagining a wreck was safer than driving straight into one. I heard her voice, low and cautious, from the living room. I didn't know how far it was going to go. I stopped it, before anything happened. But the thing is, something had happened. You don't wake up before dawn, lost and hollow, staring at the floor with your soul leaking out of your eyes because nothing happened. I turned off the water and finally faced her. You stopped it? Or he did? That question landed like a hammer between us. She blinked, visibly flinched, and then her shoulders sank like she'd finally run out of defenses. She didn't answer, which, of course, was an answer. I grabbed a towel, dried my hands, and leaned against the counter just to stop myself from pacing. So what now? Am I supposed to say thank you? Thank you for not sleeping with him? She didn't cry. I honestly don't know if that made it better or worse. I almost wanted her to break down, because then I could believe she was hurting. Instead, she just nodded slowly like she expected this. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I don't know what's wrong with me. Lately, I feel like I don't even recognize myself. Well, I sure as hell don't recognize you either. I snapped before I could stop myself. My voice echoed more than I wanted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was confusion. And deep, deep humiliation. Because here's what I hadn't told her, and probably never will. That night, while she was out, I found the envelope in her coat pocket. A small white envelope with nothing but a hotel key card and a business card tucked inside. Trent's business card. She must have forgotten it was there. Or maybe she hadn't. I didn't tell her I knew. I just kept it buried like everything else. Because once you start digging through lies, you either find answers or graves. You didn't come home for almost 10 hours, I continued, still trying to keep my voice from shaking. You weren't answering. You turned off your location. You didn't even tell me you were going. I was just supposed to wait here like some idiot hoping the love of his life remembered he existed. She finally looked at me again, and what I saw scared me. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even sadness. It was exhaustion, like she'd already made peace with something terrible. I thought I wanted to feel alive again, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But all I feel is empty. And that was when I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. This wasn't just about the party, or Trent, or the ring. This was about a woman who had been slipping away for months while I kept pretending our Sunday brunches and routine Netflix nights were enough to hold a marriage together. She was gone. Not physically, but the version of her I knew, the one who used to trace little circles on my hand while we talked about meaningless things, that version didn't walk back through the door this morning. Someone else did, and I had no idea what to do with her. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Her on the couch, me leaning against the kitchen counter, both of us suspended in the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room but crushes it. Eventually, she stood, slowly, like her bones were heavier than they'd ever been. She walked toward the bedroom without saying a word, and for a moment, I thought she was just going to crawl into bed and pretend none of it had happened. But then she stopped at the doorway and turned around. "I'll sleep on the couch," she said flatly. And it should have comforted me, but instead it felt like watching her lower a casket into the ground. I just nodded and didn't follow. When the door closed behind her, I slumped into a chair, finally alone with the thoughts I'd been trying so hard to ignore. I reached into the drawer by the fridge where we kept junk, old batteries, dried-out pens, coupons we'd never use. And tucked behind a stack of takeout menus was the envelope. Still there. Still real. I pulled it out and opened it again, like maybe in the daylight it would stop being what it clearly was. Inside, the hotel keycard. Room 408. The business card. Trenton Hale, Regional Strategy Consultant. I flipped it over. There was handwriting. Just 3 words, scribbled in blue ink. Same room, always. I nearly dropped it. What the hell did that mean? Always. Like this wasn't some one-time mistake? Like there had been others? The thought sent a freezing rush through my chest. I suddenly felt like I didn't know what day it was, what year, or who I'd been sleeping next to all this time. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat in the dark until the sun came up again, until the birds outside started making noise like the world still worked. At some point, I realized I had to know more. I had to confirm whether this was what I feared, or if my mind was turning shadows into monsters again. So I made a choice I never thought I would. I drove to that hotel. I didn't even brush my teeth. Just threw on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed the envelope, and left while she was still asleep on the couch, curled up in the same fetal position she used whenever she had a stomachache. The city looked different through the windshield, like it knew what I was about to do and was judging me for it. When I pulled into the parking lot, my heart was pounding so hard I thought the guy at the front desk would hear it before I said a word. I walked in like I belonged there and headed straight for the elevators. Room 408. I stood outside it for 2 full minutes, just breathing, just listening. Then I slid the key card in. The light turned green. The door clicked, and my whole world shifted. The room was empty. Neat. Not a sign of chaos. No smell of perfume. No jacket flung over the chair. No half-finished wine glasses or heels on the carpet. Just a bed made tight, curtains drawn, television remote centered perfectly on the nightstand. But there was one thing. A single strand of red hair on the pillow. My wife is blonde. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't a one-time setup. This room had been used before. Possibly by him. Possibly with others. Or, God help me, possibly with her. I stepped back, shut the door, and practically stumbled into the hallway. I didn't have proof of anything yet, but I knew what my gut was telling me. Whatever happened that night wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time she let me see the ending. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the hotel. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard to stay on the wheel properly, and my head felt like it was filled with static. I pulled over at a gas station, sat in the parked car, and stared at the steering wheel like it had betrayed me. That room. That stupid, clean, normal-looking hotel room. It was like standing at a crime scene where the victim had already been erased and all you had left was the echo. The strand of red hair. It could have belonged to anyone. That's what my rational brain said. Housekeeping. Some random guest. Someone else entirely. But the ring on my wife's finger hadn't just vanished on accident, and she didn't return home looking like a woman who had spent the night catching up with friends. Something had happened. Whether she crossed a line or just walked right up to it and stared into the void, I couldn't tell anymore. And maybe I was already past the point of needing physical proof. Maybe I just needed honesty. When I finally pulled into our driveway, her car was still there. She hadn't left for work. I took a deep breath and walked inside. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the table in one of my old hoodies, like we were just another couple with mismatched schedules and too many shared mugs. The contrast hit me like a slap. How normal everything looked. How nothing matched what I felt. She looked up, startled. "Where did you go?" I dropped the envelope on the table. Her face changed instantly. Her mouth didn't open, but her eyes did. Wide. Terrified. And I could see it. The realization that her hidden world had collided with mine. "I went to the hotel," I said, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. "Room 408. I used the key." Her lips parted, but still no sound came out. "I didn't see anything. I continued. Just a clean room and a single red hair on the pillow. I don't know what it means, but I know what I felt when I walked in. She slowly pushed the chair back and stood. Micah, I never stayed there. I didn't. She hesitated. I went, but I didn't go inside. I stared at her. So what was the key for? She swallowed hard. He gave it to me, in case I changed my mind. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. Did you change your mind? I asked, barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. That was it. That one pause. That one silence. It told me more than any long confession could have. I turned around and started walking toward the bedroom. I'm not going to scream, I said over my shoulder. I'm not going to call names. I just need you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a while. I can't breathe in this house with you right now. She moved after me, panicked. Micah, please, nothing happened. I messed up. I know, but I didn't. I swear I didn't do anything. You didn't have to, I said without turning around. The damage is already done. She stood frozen in the hallway, her whole body trembling. I could see it from the corner of my eye. Her knees slightly bent, her fingers twitching, her mouth trying to form the right words to undo the worst ones she'd never said. You don't love him, do you? I asked, still facing away. No, she said instantly. But it was too fast, too automatic. Do you love me? I asked next. She hesitated, and that hesitation broke something I didn't even know was left standing inside me. She didn't answer. Not right away. Not even when I turned to look at her directly. I watched her eyes shift, first toward the floor, then toward the window, anywhere but at me. It was like she was trying to find a different reality to escape into, one where none of this had happened, where I hadn't found the keycard, where she hadn't shown up at dawn like a ghost returning from somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. I repeated the question, quieter this time. Do you love me, Lacey? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Then finally, after what felt like an hour trapped in 3 seconds, she whispered, I don't know. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness at first. What I felt was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity, like someone had ripped off a blindfold I didn't realize I'd been wearing for years. I just nodded, my jaw locked tight, and walked into the bedroom to grab my overnight bag. Not because I wanted to leave, not because I had a plan, but because I knew that staying in that moment, in that house, would destroy what little was left of me. She followed me to the doorway, not stepping inside, just watching. Where are you going? She asked, voice trembling. I don't know, I said, throwing clothes into the bag without folding anything. But I can't be here while you figure out if you still care. Micah, please, she said, stepping forward. This isn't who I am. I was lost. You didn't get lost, I snapped, spinning around to face her. You chose this. You chose to walk out that door. You chose to lie about where you were. You chose to keep that key. And you chose silence every step of the way until I forced it out of you. She looked like I'd slapped her. I didn't care. I zipped the bag and slung it over my shoulder. Her eyes searched my face like she was hoping for a flicker of mercy. I didn't give it to her. Not this time. As I reached the front door, she spoke again, softer now, almost desperate. Are you going to see a lawyer? I'm going to see my brother, I said flatly. He has a couch. That's all I need for now. You're really leaving? She whispered. I turned to her one last time. You left first, Lacey. I'm just catching up. And then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't turn back. I just stepped into the cold air and let it hit me like a reset button. But walking away didn't give me peace. It just gave me space to feel everything at once. The betrayal, the doubt, the awful, lingering question that still echoed in my head. What else didn't I know? Because the truth is, once someone lets you stand in that much silence for that long, you start wondering how many times they've practiced it. I drove for 30 minutes before pulling over in a grocery store parking lot. I stared at the steering wheel, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Then I opened my phone and did what I had been too afraid to do all along. I opened her texts, not just from that night, but weeks back, months, and I saw them. Deleted messages recovered from the cloud. Conversations she thought were gone. Trent wasn't new. There were photos, jokes, late night, thinking about you texts, a saved draft that had never been sent. I wish I'd met you first. My entire chest went hollow. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern. One she dressed up as confusion, hidden behind half-truths and a broken ring finger. And I finally understood. This wasn't the beginning of our end. It was the middle, and I had no idea how long ago the beginning had passed. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought finding those messages, seeing her words, the intimacy, the playful emojis, the little inside jokes she never shared with me, would send me spiraling. But instead, I felt this numb, sterile calm. Like my body knew there wasn't room left for any more pain. Only action. I scrolled through every conversation. There was a routine to them. She messaged him when I was at work, when she said she was going to the gym, during work trips, even on our anniversary weekend. When I thought she had food poisoning, she was texting him from the hotel bathroom. I remembered holding her hair back as she vomited, stroking her back, while whispering that I'd take care of everything. Meanwhile, she was messaging him under the covers, saying, "Wish you were here instead." I didn't realize how long I sat there in that parking lot until the sun had fully risen. People walked past my car, carrying groceries and kids, heading to normal mornings. And I sat there, staring at a version of my wife I didn't even recognize. My phone buzzed. It was her. "Please come home. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to, but because I honestly didn't know which part of me would be doing the talking, husband, victim, or stranger. But something had changed inside me. I could feel it, like a dam had cracked, and now nothing was holding back the truth. I wasn't afraid of her reaction anymore. I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of staying with someone who had already left me in every way that mattered. I drove back, not to return, but to confront. To end it with my own words, not hers. When I walked through the door, she was in the same hoodie, sitting on the edge of the couch like she hadn't moved. She stood when she saw me and tried to rush over, but I raised a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said. My voice was quiet, but steady. "You've done enough." She froze in place. I dropped my phone on the coffee table with her messages pulled up. She didn't even touch it. Her face crumbled the moment she saw the screen. "You went through my phone?" she asked, as if that was the betrayal. "You left it all there," I said, shaking my head. "You didn't even bother hiding it properly. Because somewhere deep down, maybe you wanted me to know." Tears filled her eyes. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. I waited. "Micah, I didn't sleep with him. Not physically." "You keep repeating that like it's a badge of honor," I snapped. "But you gave him everything else. Your time, your attention, your secrets. That's what you used to give me. And now I'm sitting here wondering if I ever had it in the first place, or if I just borrowed it until someone better came along." "There wasn't supposed to be a someone better," she whispered. I laughed bitterly. "Then why did you keep him around for almost a year?" She sat down, covering her face. Her shoulders shook, and I knew she was crying. But I didn't go to her. I didn't comfort her. That part of me had gone quiet. "You didn't just break my heart, Lacey," I said. "You broke the part of me that believed we were still worth saving." Silence hung in the air between us like smoke. Thick, suffocating. She looked up finally, mascara streaked down her face, and asked the one thing I wasn't prepared for. "Are you leaving me?" And for once, I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. "You left me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking out of the empty house you left behind." She didn't follow me to the door. That surprised me more than anything. After everything, after the tears, the silence, the confessions, I expected a last-ditch plea. One more tear-soaked please. But she just sat there, eyes hollow, mouth slightly open like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the right words anymore. Maybe there weren't any left. I stepped outside into the cold morning light, that odd in-between hour when the world feels like it's just waking up, like maybe even time is trying to decide what kind of day it's going to be. I stood there on the porch for a long while, breathing in the air I hadn't tasted in what felt like months. Free air, clean air, air without guilt in it. And as strange as it sounds, I felt relief. Not because I'd won anything, not because I proved her wrong, but because I'd finally stopped betraying myself by pretending things were okay when they weren't. The hardest part wasn't her lies. It was me choking down my instincts night after night, convincing myself love was supposed to hurt like that. It's not. Over the next few weeks, I stayed with my brother, then got my own place across town. Small, quiet, nothing special, but it was mine. I filled the kitchen with the foods I liked, slept diagonally across the bed, and turned the TV up as loud as I wanted. I stopped waiting for someone to come home. I started showing up for myself instead. Lacey tried reaching out again. Messages. voicemails, even a letter, handwritten like it was 1997. I read them. I didn't ignore her. But I didn't respond either. Not out of anger. Just closure. I realized that not every apology needs an audience. Some things you outgrow quietly. And then, one Saturday, while browsing through an art exhibit in a little gallery I never would have stepped into when I was married, I met someone. Her name was June, a volunteer who offered me a tour because I looked seriously lost. She was sharp, sarcastic, and the first person in months who made me laugh without effort. We didn't fall in love instantly. It was slower, more honest, less about fixing each other and more about seeing each other clearly. I didn't tell her my whole story right away, but when I did, she didn't flinch. She just listened. And when I finished, she said, "You didn't get destroyed. You just got redrawn." Maybe that's what this was all along. Not the end of my life, just the end of pretending. Now, every time I pass a mirror, I see someone who got knocked down hard, but didn't stay down. Someone who learned that silence can be more honest than words. Someone who finally realized that love isn't measured by how much pain you're willing to carry, but by how gently you're willing to put it down when it's no longer yours. And for the first time in forever, I'm okay. No, better. I'm free.